What's this bullshit? Laughable, man.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another show of TNO. We are your Thursday Night Outcasts, and this is a recap of Winners at War, episode 11. And today we have another guest, but this isn't just an ordinary guest. This guest is a designer by day, a musician by night, and he's officially a winner of an org, Survivor Costa Rica Season 12. So he knows what he's talking about when it comes to Survivor. Please welcome Ben Richman. I call him Benji.
Either one. Thank you. No, it's great to be here. I love your guys' show, so it's an honor to be here, and this should be really fun.
Awesome, Ben. Thanks so much for joining us. We really enjoyed your confessionals. If there are links to it, we'll gladly share it.
Yeah, I'll have to. I have them on YouTube, so yeah, people can go back through them if they want to
awesome.
See what it was all about.
We're looking forward to seeing someone on the island who's been on TNO. We've had some people on TNO which have been on the island, so now we just need someone who's going to the island. So thank you.
I'll do my best.
Without any further ado,
wait,
I think
Cobus, I do want to say, like, so I played this org with Ben, and we became very close throughout the season. But this man, he is a strategic mastermind, and he made his way all the way to the end. So if he doesn't apply for the next season of Survivor, I'm going to be very, very disappointed.
Well, Claudio definitely kept me on my toes during the online game, so that was good prep if I ever get on the island.
Yeah, well, that's Claudio for you. He always keeps you on your toes, no matter what you do with him. Any case, this week, I mean, we saw an episode that we can basically dedicate to one player. I think for once, the Golden Spear decision is going to be unanimous. But nevertheless, it was the Tony show this week. But Tony did a bunch of things right, and I'm going to elaborate on that now. But Ben, tell us what particularly stood out in this episode for you with regards to what Tony did right. What was the top thing that he got right in this episode?
Yeah, you're right that there was so much that it's hard to pick just one. I think what we saw that impressed me most, and it's something that maybe Tony doesn't always get the most credit for, is how good his social game is. And we really saw that when he was able to convince 3 people across 2 different alliances to give him a fire token so that he could compete against them in an immunity challenge. I mean, that's insane that he could. I mean, how do you do that? They had no real reason to give him one. I mean, maybe they want him to vote with them, but that's insane that they paid him to compete in an immunity challenge, and then he beat all of them at the immunity challenge. That's off the charts.
That was beautiful. Claudio, with regards to the extortion advantage, he reminded me a bit of you when he was telling the story. He was so he said, "Ooh, I got this advantage from the island," and I thought to myself, that's a bit Claudio for me.
Yeah, no, and his reaction as soon as after he's read that note and he's thrown it in the air, I think I would have done exactly the same thing. I probably would have thrown it up in the ball and thrown it at the camera and just walked away. But yeah, going back to Ben's point, is his social game is something. I mean, I was telling you this earlier, Cobus, and I've been watching The Matrix because it's been on Netflix, and I just think right now he is the anomaly. He's the glitch and survivor. He's making things work. I mean, his game is so interesting that you would think, I mean, he came back, it didn't work. First one he does is completely unique, and all the things fall in the right places for him, and he wins it. So you're like, wow, this is a once-off. Second time he goes crazy, he gets voted out, and now, like Ben said, he's added the social part to the game. And he's probably always had it. Maybe baby cakes, his wife told him just to play it cool, but he's added this in, and now he's timing things. Now, I think the next question we've got to ask is the timing of the move. Is the timing the right time for what he had done? I don't know. What do you think, Ben?
I'm a big fan in Survivor of it's better to make a move too early than too late. Because if you make one too late, you often don't realize it until you're already on the edge of extinction and you can't do anything about it at that point. If you make it too early, you at least have an opportunity to do damage control, to kind of adapt to wherever the game is moved. And we kind of have seen this where if you look at last episode when Kim is trying to make this move and she doesn't have the numbers to do it, well, she doesn't have the numbers because they just voted out Adam and they just voted out Wendell. She made the move too late. By the time she wants to make a move, it's 5 versus 5. Well, you're kind of screwed at that point. So I don't think Tony could have waited much longer. If Jeremy goes home in this episode, he doesn't really have the numbers to make a move against Sophie anymore.
Yeah, I think that's very valid commentary, Ben, saying that you should rather make a move earlier rather than later. I mean, the previous guy we had on TNO, Mike, we spoke a bit about that. I can't remember whether it was in the episode or just before the episode when we were just chatting. But Mike almost got a huge threat out of his season, out of the game. But he made that move just too late. And like you say, if it's too late, it's too late. You can do nothing about it. But any case, I just want to sit to the side here. A scene that stood out for me in this episode was when Tony said, "Say hello to my little friend." And any case, I just want to give kudos to Claudio for the
That is more of a Scarface comment. That was just last minute, so I just figured, if there was someone pulling rabbits out of all hats, that was definitely Tony. But if we're going back to the immunity challenge and something that he wins, and again, going back to your points, Ben, where you said, he manages to convince people to let him play, it's completely bizarre. Because even if you're in his alliance, why would you take the risk? I suppose maybe like you need his vote to guarantee what happens. And that's probably the argument that he's using to his advantage. But at the same time, I mean, first and foremost, in the game of Survivor, your priority is number one, and that's you. So to be able to get flipped by him in that moment, pure brilliance. But then going back to the actual award or reward, immunity challenge, I look at Jeremy just before and I rewatched the episode again, and I'm not sure if Jeremy steps off after he sees Ben or he actually just falls. I don't know. What do you guys think happened there?
It did look really weird, but there's no way he stepped off intentionally, right? I mean, he knows he was being targeted, but I agree. It looked really odd. It looked like he kind of just gave up, but I think it just looked weird. I don't think there's any way he threw that challenge, right?
What I must admit is I think if you're in a challenge like that, which is actually all about concentration, it must be super hard when someone next to you falls out. I always check the scene, the setup, and see if you can see someone falling out next to someone else, and they rarely do. But in this case, maybe that happened. Maybe the fact that Ben dropped, just let his concentration fall for that moment, and he stepped off. So yeah, but it was a bit of a coincidence there, Claudia. So yeah, no, it was, but it was hectic, and also for Tony, which was adding to his resume, which we'll chat a bit about later as well. But I mean, the second time that he wins immunity ever in Survivor is the second time in a row. I mean, he's reminding me a bit of Rick Devens in Edge of Extinction at this point in time. But yeah, nevertheless, he's I think to some extent he's got a huge target on his back. Just quickly, Ben, in this case, what do you think is the way forward for a Tony from winning 2 immunities? Have you been building your resume too aggressively, or what's your feeling on that?
Yeah, I mean, with most players, you would say they should take a step back now and kind of try to get lower on the radar, but that's just not how Tony works, right? I mean, in Cagayan, he never had the moment where he thought, okay, I've done too many moves, let's pull back. I mean, he's Tony. He's not going to get off the radar, is he? So I kind of think he should just kind of go full force. And he's got an idol. Maybe he can find another one or get some other advantage. I kind of think his path is just steamroll to the end, and it's either going to work or it isn't.
I have to agree with that 100%. I mean, he knows now that Sophie's saying that, she's gone home with the idol in her crotch. He knows there's one out there. And if there's one thing he's good at, it's finding idols. So I think that's probably his next move as the next episode starts is go idol hunting. But then at the same time, it's like, jeepers, he can't afford to take the foot off the gas, because if he does, he's already a target now. 2 immunity challenges. He's flipped the alliance. I mean, he's already got an argument like in the horizon there with Sarah. And he's lost that trust where he's broken it in previous seasons before. So, like you said, he's going to have to go forth and luckily or hopefully work with the Jeremy in the trust that he's built from this move, and a Michelle possibly.
And Nick. I mean, that's sort of, Nick didn't get a lot of attention this episode, but 2 episodes ago, he was being targeted and he was on the bottom, and now he's suddenly the right-hand man of the most powerful player in the game. I mean, that's a pretty good spot to be in.
Sorry, Coach.
Claudia, what I just quickly wanted to touch on with also what Ben mentioned now was, how things shifted was, I mean, it feels like just the other day we spoke about Tony going crazy when in that episode where I think it was when Sandra was voted out, when Tony, went into the spy shack and all that. And he sort of like almost, lost it a bit in that episode. But how does a guy recover from there to where he is now? I mean, how does that happen? Is it baby cakes?
Yeah, it's really
bring the magic.
He's kind of played, other than like you said, that one tribal, or before that one tribal when he went kind of nuts. He kind of has done exactly what he told us he was going to do in the first episode when he said, I got to get their guard down, and then once it's down, I go over the top. I mean, he's kind of done that perfectly, other than that one that episode when Sandra went out.
Sure. So the long-term plan. So Ben, are you basically saying it's been Tony's long-term plan, and he's just executing it perfectly?
I think so. I mean, maybe not the specifics of it as far as I'm going to take Sophie out at the final 9, but yeah, I mean, if you go back to that premiere episode, I think one of his first confessionals, he's saying everybody thinks I'm crazy and aggressive, and I need to slowly convince them I'm not, and then I could be crazy and aggressive again. And he's kind of in that position now. And he might be kind of vulnerable now, but he does have the idol. I think Nick is with him. I think Jeremy has every reason to be with him. If he can get Sarah back on his side, that might be a big if. Why wouldn't Michelle keep working with him? I kind of think he's got a solid 4 alliance if he can keep it together, and that's always the big if.
That is a big if. Claudio, do you want to weigh in on that big if?
Yeah, man.
Go for it.
Yeah. Sorry. I mean, there are 2 factors to that big if, and the first one being, I know this whole show is pretty much Tony's show. He did get 18 confessionals, and I think that is a record on Survivor. No other person's gotten more confessionals in one episode, so well done, Tony. He is, in my opinion, the Rock of Survivor, like the Rock is to WWE. I'm going to look at Kim now. And Kim, in my opinion, she's done well in this episode. She's come in. She knows she's at the bottom again. She doesn't like being at the bottom. It's one thing she absolutely loathes. I think all these players don't like the chaos because they're used to being in control. But Kim in particular, she doesn't like it. She sees straight through Tony's nonsense. She can see that, he's playing Jeremy and he's playing in the middle, which is kind of where you always want to be. And I mean, Ben will tell you when we played together, that's kind of where I was at all times. And I suppose Ben's charm eventually won me over to join him. But yeah, that's where you want to be from Tony's perspective. But Kim calls it out. She goes, okay, cool. Jeremy, there's no point trying to save this guy. Save one number. What my best bet is take Denise, jump overboard, and then try and wheel my way back in there. And she's done that very well. And I don't think many people are talking about that because it was the Tony show. I don't know, how do you think she played that, Ben?
I think you're totally right. Because one of the most shocking things is, like I said, last episode we had this 5 versus 5 division. And then suddenly Kim and Denise do such a good job of joining that alliance that they think they have enough votes to split the vote, which is why Tony was able to do what he did with the 4-3-2 vote. I totally agree. I mean, it didn't look good for Kim in this episode because she was on the wrong side of the vote again, but she played it pretty perfectly of completely getting in with an alliance that had just been targeting her.
Yeah, and then on that note as well, if you see the secret scene, she kind of from an empathetic point of view, she builds a nice relationship there with Sarah, who is suffering from PTSD from how she won in the previous season that she had won it. And I think this is what I told Corbus in the previous episodes, is that one thing she's very aware of is how people perceived her winning of the game. So it's one of those things where she doesn't know, does she keep playing ruthlessly or not? And Kim was there to comfort her. So in this moment in time, or in this rocky waters with her and Tony, there's definitely going to be a shoulder for her to lean on, and that's going to be Kim's. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic as to where the Kim and Denise factor plays the role in the bigger picture, and to where they go and who they take with them. I think that's going to be a huge thing. But I also think Michelle, by the way, guys, Michelle thought on her feet very quickly. I don't know, does she not need to get mentioned for this Golden Spear somewhat? Definitely not going to win it, but I mean, she needs to get mentioned. Purvis?
I think she does deserve a mention. That was a pretty good lie on the spot. I don't know, Ben. How are your lying skills? Would you have done better?
Oh, he's good. He's pretty good.
I was going to say, Claudio might be able to answer that question better than I can. No, I agree. I like that. I mean, I think that lie about the 50-50 coin probably won't matter, but it was a clever lie in the moment. I agree. Kind of like I was saying with Nick, is Michelle was on the outs coming into this merge. She was barely in on last vote, if she was in at all. We're not really, I still don't really know why she voted for Tyson. And again, suddenly she's working with the most powerful player in the game and is on the right side of a 4-3-2 vote, which is, to me, as good as it gets in Survivor, to be on the right side of a weird vote like that. Yeah, I think Michelle definitely deserves credit for being a player that's been on the outs and somehow is never getting voted out.
So
yeah, I think I've told Curtis this before. That is her game, which is pretty interesting. I suppose the edit's showing us a bit more of an uneasy feeling towards how she's playing and how uncomfortable she is in the scenario. But technically, on her season that she won, this is how she played it. She's always on the outskirts, and people always forget about her, and they see her as a number up until the moment that it's too late. So, yeah, credit to Michelle for that.
So are we saying Michelle and Kim are our other nominees for Golden Spear? You briefly mentioned Nick, Ben, for just a quick nomination. I think I must say Nick also, the fact that he got up early in the morning, to go idol hunting. I mean, it's I'm not gonna say I should nominate someone solely for that move. I mean, he did one or two things right this episode, but that also showed some commitment to the game, which was quite cool. But any other nominations for Golden Spear? I know we all know who it's going to, but are there any other nominations from your side?
I'm going to just throw in your person. And I know Corvus and I have spoken about mentioning someone from Edge of Extinction, but I think if you look at this is a power duo, how can we not mention Natalie and Poverty? Firstly, the whole, I think that's also something we need to talk about now, is the extortion advantage. I mean, so arbitrary. The way in which they find it so random. It pops up and they're like, oh, well, look, this is something we can do with it. But I think credit has to go to Natalie and Poverty for going, okay, wow. How can we use this, and who do we send this to? And I don't know if they choose anyone else in the show, their game is completely sunk. It's game over. And then everyone goes on. Firstly, people aren't, from what I've seen, it hasn't been great feedback as to this advantage. But at the same time, like if it was ever going to be played, they chose the right player to use it on. So credit has to go to them for that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I loved the way it was edited with them talking about, who's the most chaotic player, and it cuts to Tony. I mean, that was perfect. But yeah, I agree. They deserve credit for that.
I think Lauren said, what was it? Tony has extreme chaotic energy. That's what I read, putting on Twitter. She's like, and I was like, that's the perfect way to explain him.
Yeah.
It was beautiful when he started reading the note. He said, oh, this should be illegal. And then he stuck to his guns. No, this should be illegal. That was beautiful to see.
And I loved how they emphasized how criminal it was. And I was like, this whole thing is criminal. And it's brilliant that it was played with the cop as well. I was like, the cop knows how bad this is.
Well, and it was just great TV of all people to get that, for it to be Tony is just, you can't ask for better TV than Tony reading that and realizing slowly that he's the one that's screwed. I mean, that's just great.
Anyway, gentlemen, can we throw the Golden Spear for Tony Blachos?
We can indeed.
Yeah. Okay, here we go, Claudio.
Yeah. Ben, you call it, Ben. No, Ben, you got to call it,
Say
not catch it.
congratulations,
What? Oh, what do I do here? My bad.
No, you just say congratulations.
Tony.
Oh, congratulations, Tony.
All right.
Moving on to the wooden spoon, and the wooden spoon is going to be a tough one to give to because why? Not many people did something wrong in the episode, and so anyone want to start off with who they think deserves the wooden spoon?
I think Claudio, that we have to go with the general soldier there on your right hand side. I think he does deserve a nomination. I mean, last week was her episode. This week was Tony's episode. But yeah, she did not keep her ear on the ground, and we speculated about it last week. We said after making such a big move, your name is gonna come up. You have to realize that you are gonna be a target, and you don't. We also said you don't necessarily tone down your game if you can't, if that's not who you are, if that's not going to fit in with your temperament and your character. I mean, by all means, but then you should be mindful enough to realize that, especially if you have an idol, that you might need to play it at the next tribal council. Ben, what do you think? Should Sophie have played the idol, realized, I mean, she's gone up in the rankings and that she's a bit of a target now?
Yeah, I just don't know how she plays the idol. I don't know what would have tipped her off to play the idol. And I think that's kind of a credit to Tony, not to keep lavishing praise on Tony, but it just was it really was kind of an out of left field move at this point. So I don't blame her for not playing the idol as much as splitting the vote. I mean, they just cannot split the vote in that situation. It leaves her so vulnerable. It leaves all of them so vulnerable. I think I agree with your nomination, but I think the biggest sin Sophie committed was splitting the vote.
Yeah, I think splitting the vote is, I'm not a huge fan unless you're 100% sure that someone that you're going after has an idol. I think there's no need for it to unnecessary risk. And you know what, if you're going to go home because you haven't split the vote, I'd rather take that as a probability than go the other way where you go home with an idol in your pocket. And I think going back to her biggest issue is she had the best seat in the game. And the problem with the best seat is it gets super comfortable, and comfortable leads to complacency. And that's what doesn't tip her off. She's running the game. She was running the game, and now she ran it all the way out of the game, and with the idol in her crotch. And that's the interesting part. Also, talking about blindsides, I know from our experience, Ben, when we did do a couple of those blindsides, people were seriously hurt afterwards, and she speaks about it, not like feeling uncomfortable and feeling how hard so it is. And when you're playing personally with a person one-on-one and seeing them face-to-face, I think it's something difficult to deal with, especially when you're on the outside of that blindside. You don't know what's happened while the game's continuing. I don't know, Ben, how do you think that reaction would be if you got blindsided?
Yeah, and I think it was really interesting seeing Sophie's reaction, and especially, a lot of these winners have never been voted out before at all. And so to be blindsided like that when you think you're in such a good position with an idol, yeah, that was brutal. And her talking about how she felt like she was a bottom tier winner, which I've never considered her a bottom tier winner. Yeah, that was kind of heartbreaking.
Yeah, and that's something else that someone said is like, if there's one thing, despite the fact that she was dominating the game at that stage, I think if there's one thing she could have improved on is that little bit of self-confidence in terms of knowing, like driving it with absolute will and knowing that, okay, cool, in this situation, I'm controlling the game, but let me think about how I can not make sure I go out with that idol in my pocket. So that is one thing. I think Richard Hatch was the one who said that, by the way.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kubitz, you were saying something. Oh, no, sorry, Ben. What are you going to say?
Well, I think that's a really interesting point, that maybe it was her lack of confidence almost makes you think you're not being viewed as a threat. And so therefore you might not be targeted as much. I mean, maybe that was that, I don't think that's the reason she didn't play the idol, but it might play a small part in, if she thinks she's not being perceived as a top tier winner, maybe she doesn't think people are gunning for her because of that.
I suppose that's a valid point, because it's that whole argument with pilots versus passengers, the lions versus the hyenas. If she still thinks she's in the middle somewhere, then she's not going to play it, even though she knows she's controlling the game, which is actually valid. Sorry, Kubitz, you were saying.
No, Claudio, I must agree with all your points, especially with Ben's point is I must admit, it would have been tough for Sophie to know that she has to play the idol. Nothing tipped her off to do it. I solely suggest, that you should be a bit more mindful of the fact that you might have to play the idol if you are such a big threat. But like you guys have said, she didn't maybe consider herself as like such a top tier player, and I hope after this season she realizes that she is. I mean, she's right up there. Any other wooden spoon nominations, Claudio?
Yo, man. I guess we go back to Tony because, I mean, despite the great game he played, and this is what we were speaking about earlier, is where to from here now? Like, has he left himself in the best position? I understand that we've said, okay, cool. He has to go for it. This is the best time to get out Sophie. I suppose it also goes to the credit in terms of the game that Sophie was playing, that he knew he had to get out now because he was worried of the relationship she had with Sarah. And I did this similar thing with Ben at the time when we were playing our Costa Rica game, where there were two guys called Avi and Scott, and they were super tight, super tight. And I knew Ben was going to win this game. And the problem was I was super close with Ben, and that was the struggle I was having with how do I get rid of this guy. So I needed to find someone. So I knew if I got rid of Scott, who was Avi's number one ally, which is a similar case between Sarah and Sophie. If I got rid of Scott, Avi had to work with me. Even though I've broken his trust regardless, he's not going to go work with the other guys because he's on the minority. And so I thought maybe, I had a chance with Kenny, and the three of us could try and maybe get rid of Ben. That didn't happen because of the relationship Ben had with Kenny in the end. But I suppose that move makes sense for someone like Tony. He's hoping that Sarah's going to run to him, and I don't think it's going to pan out that way. I don't know. What do you think, Ben?
Well, and it's similar to another move I made when we played in Costa Rica when I voted out Riley to try to get you closer to me because I knew you were close with Riley. And yeah, the risk is it's either going to work and that person will run to you, or you're going to piss them off and they're going to run away from you. And so it's always sort of it's a roll of the dice. Sarah seems like someone who's going to be really pissed off about it. And maybe she'll forgive Tony, but how many times is she going to forgive Tony? I mean, this is the first time he screwed her over. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point that you make, Claudia. Seeing as it was the Tony show this week, he's basically he gets a full episode of Survivor and he gets a full episode of TNO. Golden Spoon, Wooden Spoon, and Storm is brewed. But yeah, I'm not 100% convinced that we can award him Wooden Spoon, but it's like you say, there is merit for at least a nomination. I mean, it is a bit of a risk that he's exposed himself to now in these circumstances that he's placed himself in. So yeah, what
I mean, we could mention. I know Nick's doing really well because like Michelle, they're on the outskirts. No one's seeing them as the big threats right now. But what was it, Vampire Donovan? you being surprised that he was awake looking for the idol. Vampires don't sleep, Cobus.
Yeah, I must say he's got a couple of vampire fangs, and there's. But yeah, Nick, I think Nick didn't do too badly. Any case, are you guys with me with awarding?
Wait. I don't think we've spoken much of this season, and I think we need to mention him. And I want to get your opinion, Ben, because this is, Ben. Actually, this is exactly what I want to talk about. It actually threw me out, but I want to get your opinion, Ben, because Ben right now, if you're playing a season of all winners and you're playing such a conservative game and you make it to the end, who's going to give you that money? Honestly, who's going to give you that title? Do you think, what do you think he has to do moving forward?
That's a great question. It also seems like everybody kind of is sick of him. I mean, we've had Adam talk about a couple episodes ago about how he was tired of Ben. Jeremy in this episode said he hates his guts now, which is pretty extreme. Yeah, I kind of think he's got no shot. And I am probably one of the bigger fans of his. Most Survivor fans seem to kind of hate his win. I never thought he was that bad of a player. I don't see any path to the end for him other than as a GOAT. And it's weird to say GOAT in an all-winner season, but how does he win?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
It does sound like super contradictory, you know, having a goat in an all-winner season. But Claudio, just quickly touching on goatish behavior. I mean, since Denise has gotten Sandra out, I mean, she hasn't done a lot as well. What do you think of that?
I mean, that's a valid observation, but at the same time, you got to think she did do the Sandra thing. So right now on a CV, and if you go back to the conversation that was happening at Tribal, the conversation was one where, you know, it's the timing of, you know, getting the ticks on your CV. She's already got that tick. A lot of people don't. We've just mentioned Ben. He's the GOAT. Why is he the GOAT? Because he's not doing anything. And right now, I take him to the end, guaranteed, exactly because of what Ben just said. It's because he's pissing people off. He's irritating people. He's not making any moves. And when he does decide to make a move apart, then maybe he can start winning immunity challenges and he's got that credit to his game. But apart from that, he's done. So if you look at Denise has already got that feather in her cap. She's got to play it safe until the moment's right for her. Right now, people are going to use her as a number, and she's actually in a really good spot.
Yeah, and I think people also like her, whereas it just seems like people are really sick of living with Ben, which is I've heard plenty of times in my own life. But
It's got nothing to do with the name. Though. It's got nothing to do with the name. But I think Ben's issue though is he struggles to communicate with people in a sense that when the idea is not his, he gets super defensive. And there's no need to, I mean, you can listen and tolerate ideas and entertain them and make them think you're on board, but to shut it down right in front, you make it seem like you're completely unplayable. And if you feel like you're unplayable, people are naturally going to get irritated apart from all the habits that you have that you're bringing into the game. So that is a tricky one for what he's doing. And it's funny that he's not seeing that. So especially for a winner, an all winner.
Yeah, I think he's gonna have to lift his game and get his resume going if he wants any shot. You know, with the what's the name? With the jury. Any case, gentlemen, can we award the wooden spoon? Is my candidate worthy of getting the wooden spoon, or do you have reservations to awarding it to Sophie?
I think she's the best candidate, but yeah, it is sort of reluctantly because I think she, you know, I don't know what she could have done except for not split the vote.
Claudio.
Yeah, it's a begrudging idol award to be giving. I mean, to the general over here.
Yeah, I mean, we have shown her a lot of love on TNO, so I mean, giving her a wooden spoon once in a while is not gonna hurt. I mean.
Okay, fine. No, we can give her the wooden spoon, but we all have to salute when we do. That's the only way. The general needs to get her a fallen soldier salute.
Definitely. Okay, are you ready, Claudio?
Yeah, all right. 3, 2, 1. Sorry, Sophie. You got our wooden spoon. I didn't want to give it to you. I mean, I've been your fan, and it seems like Ben's your fan too. Kovas, though, Kovas been on the fence.
That's working on me. Any case, gentlemen, the storm is brewing. Okay, so at this stage, we are seeing, from my perspective, we're seeing Tony sort of in the middle. I don't know if you agree with me, but I mean, we've got 4 on his one alliance, which is Michelle, Kim, and Claudio. You're gonna have to help me out here quickly. Tony's almost fake alliance, and then you've got his real alliance, which is Ben, Sarah, and Jeremy's not in the Nick. Sorry, he's the third person. But in any case, we sort of have Tony in the middle here. So how do you navigate things going forward from here? What is your take on it, Ben?
I think, especially as you get down to lower numbers, you want to work with the people who need you the most because they're the people who are least likely to flip on you. And I think Jeremy and Michelle need Tony more than anybody. I mean, Jeremy's been targeted at back-to-back tribals. He doesn't really have, I mean, even before he was targeted, they voted out his ally in Wendell. So clearly he should realize he's not in a great position. Tony saved him. So he needs Tony. If I were Tony, I would really try to keep together this new 4-person alliance, Nick, Michelle, Jeremy, and himself, and just get someone to flip. the thing about even number tribes, like they're going to the final 8, if there is kind of a 4 versus 4 division, well, someone's going to flip. None of these people are going to Rocks for each other. I mean, is Ben going to Rocks for Kim and Denise? I don't think so. Are Kim and Denise going to Rocks for Sarah? I don't think so. So if I'm Tony, I'm telling Nick, Michelle, and Jeremy, I'm with you 100%. Final 4. Let's do this. We can get through this vote. And if we get through this vote, the 4 of us, we have the majority. We can run the show. Who doesn't say, yeah, let's do it? Who doesn't sign up for that?
Ben's logic here is on the money, especially when we played. There was a moment where I could have gone to Rocks for the other guys, and I was like, hey, at the end, it's not worth it. I've got a better shot of going with the other tribe than I do with my own tribe anyway, so let me take my chances that way. So the logic there is 100% spot on. Sorry, Kuz.
Claudio, no, I just quickly wanted to touch on Jeremy as being a threat, and I wanted to get your input as well here. Why is Jeremy a threat? Is he a threat because he can win a lot of immunities? I mean, or is he a threat because of his resume? I don't believe he has built a resume up till now in this season. What is your take on the Jeremy situation at this stage?
I think that I'm going to say this, and I want Ben to follow because he's probably going to give a better answer to this question. But I do think it's a lot of these things are based on previous games, and going into it, we do know he's still a physical threat. I mean, we don't know what happened at this last challenge, whether he was, I don't know, distracted and he fell off, he was just fatigued, etc. But he's in the challenges, he's always a threat, and he's got the social game. So if he does make it to the end, if he lands up in the final tribal council, he's got what it takes in order to persuade anyone to give him the money. So, but Ben can probably give a better answer.
No, I think you kind of nailed it, especially with the previous game. Is Jeremy's a great player. I don't mean to downplay how good he is at the game, but his biggest strength is just how likable he is. Everybody likes him. Even when they're targeting him, nobody dislikes Jeremy. So he's the last person you want to go with to the end because everybody likes him. And he is a good player. So they respect him too as a player, even if he hasn't, done that much in this game. He has a resume that goes beyond this season. So I don't think anyone's going to sit there and say he's not a good player, and they really like him. So yeah, I think you probably don't want to go to the end with him, but I kind of agree that he's not a big short-term threat. You don't want to go to the end with him, but I don't see him as a big short-term threat.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to the question that you posed a while ago, Corvus, is though, when we do get to the end and we have the final people there, the votes need to be casted for your winner. What is going to be considered? Is it the whole, this is whoever arguably wins this is going to be up there with Sandra, regardless of however they've played this game. They're going to be one of the greats. So taking that into consideration, how much of their previous game is going to be a factor in terms of the vote that they're given them?
What is?
Yeah, I think.
Ben, what's your take on that on previous games and how that is going to play a role?
Yeah, I think you're right, and that juries, I think, always want someone that represents their season well, which is sort of a weird way to look at it, but it makes sense. You want your winner to be a good winner. And for winners at war, I think that's even bigger because, like you said, Claudia, you're making them a legend. I mean, maybe the biggest legend because not only have they won twice, but they beat all these other winners. So, yeah, I think there is going to be a lot of consideration of that. And, yeah, I kind of think Jeremy fits that bill. Everybody likes Jeremy. He's a very respected winner from his first time. I think people would be comfortable with Jeremy representing winners at war. Kind of regardless of what his resume is within this season, I kind of think they would just be happy with that.
Yeah, and on that note, I think then let's dissect that a bit deeper and say, okay, cool. If we're going to look at that and we say, what are the best elements that you require to win this game? Because if we're looking at a social, we know if you've got that social strength, you've always, regardless of the game that you played throughout, you've always got a chance at final tribal council. And you know that firsthand, Ben. I mean, you dominated our season hands down, but Kenny still had a chance because of the relationships he built with people one-on-one. So what is it that you need to be the best winner? Is it, we know the social thing. For me personally, I'm saying social's huge, huge, huge compared to strategic as well as athletic and all the other things. What do you think, Ben?
I agree. And I think in some seasons, just being well-liked might not be enough because people still want to say, what move did you make? But again, these are all winners. So no, is anyone going to ask Jeremy, what move did you make? You never make moves. I mean, they don't view Jeremy that way, right? Even if he hasn't made that many moves in this season, they don't look at Jeremy and think that's a guy who doesn't make moves because they already respect him. So everybody kind of came into the season, maybe there are a few exceptions, but everybody came into this season being respected. They don't really have to earn respect. They just need to be well-liked, living with these people, make enough moves and play well enough to get to the end. And I think probably the jury would vote for them. I think it's going to be a really interesting jury because I could be totally wrong. And it could be that these winners have the opposite approach of say, if you want to win this season, you better tell us what the hell you did this season. So Claudio might know this from our season. I am really bad at reading juries. My final tribal was terrible because I could not read the jury. I thought they were all going to be mad at me and nobody was mad at me. So I walked in being defensive and it was terrible. I almost lost because of it. I can't read juries when I know the people. I definitely can't read juries when I'm just watching on TV.
Quickly, how do you who would you consider the biggest threat on the island now? If you were there now, who would you have voted off next, Claudio?
Next. You mean this coming episode 12?
This coming episode, who would have been topped on your hit list?
Right now it has to be the guy we've spoken about. The guy we've spoken about all episode. He has to be number one now. But personally, Kim. Listen, guys, Kim is the shit at this game. She knows exactly what to do. And somehow, what I found quite interesting is I think Ben, she's only played once, right? Before, and she won it. Yeah.
Yep.
So, in that game, she was in complete control. So it's been interesting to see how she's still in the game, even though she's played from the bottom up. And for me, her cues are brilliant. She knows exactly what's going on. And I think there's someone who can flip the game eventually to it. Look, Ben mentioned it earlier. She made the move too late last episode. And I think it was a complete waste of an idol. It should have been self-preservation mode. She didn't go into that. But she's got the social chops to be able to swing this thing into her favor. And I think that's someone for me who's still very dangerous. I think Sarah has the reputation of being absolutely cutthroat. So she's also another one who's super dangerous. But if we are looking within who's left on the island, not edge of extinction, we've got our top players and we've got our bottom players. I think your top ones are, you're looking at Sarah, you're looking at Kim, and you're looking at Tony. And anything else below that, those are the guys. Nick and Michelle, I'm still thinking they're going to make it to the end. But they are the ones at the bottom. They're on the outskirts. They're the so-called hyenas, the passengers. But they've still got a shot to make it to the end. Ben?
I think you're totally right especially about Kim. I think that's exactly who I would target next because everything you're saying is right about, she keeps surviving and eventually she can take control and then you're screwed, especially if she takes control in the end game. You don't even have time to get her out at that point. But maybe even a better reason to target her in addition to that is she's not really viewed as a huge threat right now. So if you take out Tony right now, if you're Sarah and you take out Tony, well, who's your shield after this? You're suddenly the biggest threat on the island. They're going to come after you, just like we saw with Sophie. But if you take out Kim, she doesn't have that much obvious power right now that I think you could take her out of the equation and you're not really changing that much except for you're protecting your end game because Kim won't be there to take over.
I agree with you. You're not rocking the boat too much by getting rid of her, and you're actually kind of keeping other people happy at the same time. So it's how you can claw back your trust, I suppose. If you've just got to deal with a disgruntled Sarah, that's one way in which you can get her back on side, given that she hasn't built the relationship already with Kim. But I like how you put that. That's a vote that's expendable in a way that you could use to your advantage, even though we also know it's 2 for 1 because she's highly dangerous.
Yeah, I think you're totally right that if you can get Sarah on board with that vote, then that's like all the damage control Tony needs to do at that point. Yeah, that's a really good point. That if Sarah's down for that, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Gee whiz, guys. All I know is if I am ever on the Survivor Island, I don't want to be there with you two. Gee whiz.
Ben is dangerous. Ben is a dangerous player.
A lot of people in our season said the same thing about us too. So you're not alone in that.
You're always 3 moves ahead. But anyway, quickly, I want to throw in something from another angle altogether, and that is Edge of Extinction. What are you guys' feelings? Are we going to see the player re-entering the next episode, or do we still have to wait a bit longer? And once again, who is your number one for coming back? Boston Rob? Claudio? You feel like Boston Rob's going to come back?
No, I
Your
think
favorite?
Ben needs. No, I think Ben needs to answer that one because
I could see Rob coming back just because, I don't know, just kind of through sheer force of will. I mean, he's good at challenges, but he also just seems like, it's sort of a cliche, but sometimes it is who wants it more. And Rob just seems so determined. He seems so determined in the last challenge. I kind of wonder if Sophie has a shot at coming back. And if she comes back, I think that might be the most interesting thing because she has a resume. We were talking about resumes earlier. She has a huge resume in this season. So if she comes back and can do a few more things to get to the end, I mean, doesn't she probably win the game?
Yeah, definitely. But if she comes back, is she not the first one out?
Right. Whoever comes back needs to be the first one out. And if the winners can't realize that, like the people on season 38 didn't realize that, then it's their own fault and they're going to lose. Because whoever comes back, I don't care if it's Natalie, the first boot, everybody on Edge of Extinction is sitting there thinking, I want to get back in the game and win. So the idea that any of them are going to think, well, someone on Edge of the Extinction doesn't deserve a jury vote. They've been spending all this time thinking, I want the jury vote. I'm from Edge of Extinction. I want the jury vote. All of them are going to at least consider voting for whoever comes back from Edge. You can't let them get to the end. It's ridiculous that they let Chris Underwood get to the end in season 38.
Yeah, and I mean, it ties down to the strength of the social game at the same time. And the fact that they spent all these days with these people on this island without playing the game, which is quite interesting. They're playing, but they're not really playing. So as soon as your guard you lower your guard a little bit, the relationship you build with the person is a lot more authentic. So coming to the end, if they do make it, then giving it to them is a lot easier, I suppose, especially with the fact that they've overcome that hurdle. But at the same time, let's hope whoever comes back in does go back out again. So it kills this whole dynamic of having an Edge of Extinction in the first place, because then it becomes a bit of a pattern if they survive the vote coming in, then they're going to be like, well, this does work. Let's just keep having it. But if it doesn't, and it's a huge disappointment. Look, it makes sense for this season, and I'm not bashing it at all. It does make sense for the season because for me, I think I said this in our intro, who's a Survivor player you really like? I really like Ethan, and I still get to see tidbits of it. And the secret scene between Yule and Poverty, we didn't get to see them play much this season, but I got to see Poverty mentor, and I keep mentioning Mr. Miyagi because she is the survivor, Mr. Miyagi. But she was mentoring Yule, and I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, I agree. There's been some good content from there. So yeah, I'm kind of glad it was on this season. And it's still, if somebody does get to the end from Edge, I think in a sense they do deserve it just because the people who didn't vote him, if the people didn't vote him out, then that's their fault. Why do any of them deserve to win if they made the big mistake of not voting out the person who came from Edge? I think that's kind of what we saw in season 38 of, how am I supposed to vote for one of these people when they let this guy get to the end when he shouldn't have gotten to the end?
Yeah, and I think the whole argument there is when Chris Underwood did make it to the end, what is the name of the guy who made it to the end with again?
Gavin.
Yeah, and I think Gavin's whole argument was that, he didn't have to go to Edge of Extinction to get to the end, and that's why he was better. And I suppose that is the theme of the season.
Right. Go ahead.
No.
You can't tell the jury he doesn't deserve to win because he got voted out. And that's the worst thing in Survivor is getting voted out. You can't tell a group of people who got voted out, hey, you're all losers, and this guy's a loser like you, vote for me. I mean, no, they're going to write his name down. Yeah, that was really a bad strategy for Gavin.
Oh, bad pitch. So, Ben, is your take also that you'd rather not see an Edge of Extinction again?
Yeah, I think I don't hate it like so many people hate it, but I could definitely do without it. I think the worst thing is just that it takes up screen time from other things. But yeah, I would definitely prefer not to see it in any kind of new player season. Maybe a legend season they could do it again. Like Claudio was saying, it's nice to be able to see our favorite players even after they get voted out. But other than that, I could do without it.
100%.
Yeah, I think it does detract from, I suppose this last episode was great because we kind of saw everything unfold step by step. And I know Tony got a lot of the airtime. And by the way, Nick hasn't been getting all the airtime, but all the airtime he does gets pure gold. I mean, it doesn't paint him in the best light, but it is certainly humorous. But yeah, I suppose when you have something like Edge of Extinction, you kind of do detract from those strategic moments that I think that's why we enjoy the game. I mean, so someone like you, for example, in your season that you played, if they had to have Edge of Extinction, we'd miss out half the stuff that you would have done.
Yeah.
So
No, yeah, I agree. And I totally agree that this episode was so good at showing the strategy, especially versus the previous episode where I think everyone going into Tribal and even after Tribal was like, what the hell just happened? This episode, I felt like we knew everything that happened, but still didn't know what the result was going to be. And that's perfect Survivor.
This was, I mean, in a lot of episodes, we sort of like get the idea that they tend to edit around it. They tend to edit the episode so that it sort of like persuades you that there is going to be a blind side, but it's not always the case. Sometimes it's you know, we all knew that the person was going to get voted out, but you know, they tried and portrayed it as a blind side. But in this case, I believe that it was actually a spectacular blind side in this instance. But yeah, and Ben, I just want to know, do you get like a kick of satisfaction when you orchestrated a blind side? I mean, Sarah got posed the same question. I don't think she answered it, you know, very truthfully. What's your truthful answer with regards to that? Seeing that the person that you blindsided is sitting right here.
I think there's like, I never really blindsided. I didn't vote out Claudia with a blindside. I want to say that I was loyal to Claudia to some extent. I think there's like three feelings you have. Is first, you think, oh my God, I can't believe that worked. And it feels great. Then you feel kind of bad for the person that's getting voted out. And then you're kind of terrified of what's about to happen, because I just really put myself on the radar by doing that. So it feels really good. Then you feel kind of bad. And then you feel kind of terrified and think, what do I do next?
Okay, so
I think that's valid, of course. I think, yeah, I think the biggest blindside that changed our game was the one that Ben was actually involved in on the out, and he just let the game unfold as it did. He had nothing to do with it, but he was potentially the one who was going to go home, and he didn't survive. And what is quite interesting was watching the tribal council was, just because of the game that we played, I was getting super nervous, especially there were beautiful moments between Ben and Jeremy looking at each other, and you're like, oh no, Ben didn't listen to Tony. He just didn't listen to Tony. And in the end, I sent Ben this picture just while we had this little break now, where he writes down Sophie's name with the biggest smile, and it was pure. I just love that moment.
Yeah, that was great. And yeah, the him staring down Ben was great too. It was sort of a callback to that first episode when they blindsided Natalie, and he was not too happy with Ben then either.
Listen, guys, I mean, I must admit, this Winners at War season, just quickly, is, I mean, it has surprised me. With a couple of episodes, I thought, you can't get any better. You can't get any better. I mean, with the Sandra episode, Claudio, I felt like you can't get any better. And I think this was better. Do you guys think what is to come might still even be better, or even what we've seen in this last episode?
I think this next vote's going to be really interesting, and Final 7 always seems interesting just because it's such a pivotal moment of, you know, if you don't really have things set up by the end of the Final 7, I think you're kind of in trouble. You need to kind of have everything in place at the Final 6. So as great as this episode was, like you're saying, the next two episodes could be even better, because this is really when the great players are going to start making the moves they need to make to get to the end.
Yeah, that's true. And I think apart from if we're looking at someone like Ben, who we've already mentioned or touched on, that he's kind of playing this GOAT game now. I mean, he has the potential to flip that on his head and make us look like a completely silly. But apart from that, these are winners, and they understand if they got to make it to the end, they're not going to win if they just ride a coattail. So big moves are in store. I think there are still a number of advantages and things that are going to come from Edge of Extinction. They're going to throw in the twist like we watched the other night. I mean, it was ridiculous. An extortionate advantage. You would have thought, like, I didn't know what I was watching.
It was so good, though. I mean, I agree. It's on paper, it's completely ridiculous, but it was so good. Like, I can't not love it, because it was some of the best TV I've ever seen.
I think the only thing that was missing from it was on the note itself. They didn't cut out letters like a ransom letter. I think if they had put that in, it would have been perfect.
Yeah, that's the only way to make it better. Yeah, you nailed it.
Listen, but did you guys pick up that Tony almost swore at the disadvantage? And I think it was in that just after he won immunity and he was able to pay back his debt or whatever, and he spoke about that disgusting disadvantage. I think in that moment he wanted to say that fucking disadvantage, but he realized his kids are gonna watch this episode. So
As are your future kids, Quibus. As are your
yeah.
But going back to what you posed earlier, and you're talking about how great this season is so far, I want to get Ben's opinion as to, if you had to rank this season as to where we've stopped right now, where would you put it? I mean, we got heroes versus villains, and I still think that's one of the greatest, but where would you put this one right now?
I think it's got to be top 4 at least. I mean, I think it definitely has potential to be number 1, but it's let's see what happens next. Yeah, I love heroes versus villains. I love Tocantins, and I love David versus Goliath, and this one is right there with them to me so far.
Yeah, the David versus Goliath one, I really enjoyed that one. And I see, was it someone who took over the Survivor? Nick had a go at someone who took over the Survivor Instagram page the other day. And he just said, yeah, someone was chirping him. I think it was Surreal. No, it wasn't Surreal. No, forgive me. I'm not going to say who it was because I can't remember who it was. But he had a real go because they're like, who is Nick? What kind of game did he play? And then he actually swore at this person and said, I'm the one who played in David versus Goliath, one of the greatest seasons. So I was like, yeah, you're right. I mean, This is also what blows my mind is he did play in that season and he won that season. And he's not really, and it's working to his advantage, but he's not really getting the credit he deserves.
He was great in that season too. I mean, I think he's underrated because Christian was so cool in that season. Everybody loved Christian, and Angelina was entertaining, and Mike White was such a great social player. And I think Nick sometimes gets forgotten a little bit, but he did things that had never been done before. I mean, that minority vote split seems so obvious now when the idea of playing an idol and then splitting the minority vote, it seems so obvious after they did it. No one had ever done it before. No one had ever even thought of doing it before. And that's a huge move. It shows that Nick has a really good mind for how votes work. And so it's not surprising when Tony comes to him with the idea of a 4-3-2 that Nick would be like, sign me up, like 4-3-2. Let's do it. That's awesome.
Man, I actually thought that moment for me was the best in this episode. That was the best. It was like, so you want to do it? He goes, oh, that's tough. So you want to do it? Yeah, definitely.
I definitely want to do it. Yeah. I mean, how would anyone turn down Tony coming up to you in Survivor and saying, want to do a 4-3-2 vote? Nobody. How could you say no to that? I mean, it's just sign up. I guess Jeremy almost said no to it. But.
Yeah, I was taken aback with Jeremy, actually, hesitating. That was like, whoa, man. What are you doing,
man? I think
it's a lifeline.
I think the issue Jeremy had there was he wasn't at the last tribal council, and it kind of was. He did have the impression that Kim played her idol, right? So he knows that she made a big move, so the trust was initially with her. So that was quite interesting. But I'm going to make a bold prediction on everything that Nick just said, and I know I've been saying it, but the prediction is that Nick is making it to the final. He's making it to the end because. If he's got these chops, he's got the chops in terms of being on the right side of the numbers, and he knows. It seems like he knows what to say at tribal as well. He gets the people going.
Yeah, that was really. You're right. We were talking earlier about how he used to be on the outs, and it was like he gave that one speech. Was it before the Adam vote where he said, if this is a war, this is the lamest war I've ever seen. And it was like normally that stuff gets you voted out, and instead it was like, oh, I guess we're working with Nick now, and he's in the numbers ever since. I mean, that's really crazy. I think he's a really good player. I'm not saying he's a legend, but I think he's a really good player, and he doesn't seem to get much appreciation in general.
All I know is I think this season is going to keep us on the edge of our seats. I mean, right until the end. Any closing remarks from your sides for this week's recap of Winners at War, Claudio and Ben?
I would just say it's so nice to see Tony on TV again and playing full 100% Tony. I think every Survivor fan, we're all lucky to be able to watch this. So great episode. Hopefully there are more great episodes like this in store.
Yeah, it blows my mind. I mean, if we got to look, I know when they're casting, I don't know what they do with the American casting process, Ben, you need to enlighten us there. But from the South African perspective, one of the questions that they ask you is who would you play like, and who is your, you know, the person you look up to. And obviously, because the South African population, as we talk, like as we speak right now, we are clued up to Survivor, but we've always been a couple of seasons behind, largely because they showed on the public TV shows and that. But the answers that everyone always gave was a Boston Rob, for example. And that's the thing that everyone's looking towards. But now I'm assuming after this, if people are watching the season and the other previous seasons he's had, Tony's going to be the favorite, fan favorite, without a doubt. It's just, I don't think what we are seeing now, no one can replicate. And I find that question super interesting. Who are you going to be like? I'm like, yo, like, I mean, you're going to play like yourself, aren't you? So how are you going to tell me I'm going to play like someone else? I just don't understand it. And no one is going to play like Tony. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And even what you said that Boston Rob is a popular answer. In American Survivor, we see those quizzes afterwards when someone gets cast and we see, who are you going to play like? And the answers are always Parvati, Boston Rob, Tony. No, you're not going to play like them because nobody can play like them. We've seen them cast people that are the next Tony. They're not the next Tony because there isn't a next Tony and there isn't a next Boston Rob or a next Parvati. Or, people say, I'm going to play like Sandra. Good luck. You're going to win twice. Yeah, I'm sure that's going to work out for you. It's, you probably shouldn't think you're going to play like the greatest players of all time.
But it is crazy how that stigma does affect someone's game. If you look at Molly last season, she literally went out because everyone's like, oh, she's got 2 guys wrapped around her finger. She's a Parvati. Let's get her out now.
Absolutely. And we saw Jason last season too, where they all thought he was like Stephen Fishback and voted him out. Like, you kind of don't. You want to distance yourself from any players that people actually like.
Yeah, you just want to be you at the end of the day. But guys, so thanks so much for joining me for another episode of TNO. It was really fun having this conversation with you. Ben, I'm sure we'll see you again in future. But man, all the best on that side of the ocean.
Thank you. And thank you guys. Thank you guys for having me. And I'd love to come back.
Cool.
Oh, yes. Thank you. But before we go though, Ben, where can the people find you, man? Well, what is it that you're doing? Where, like, if anyone wants to get in contact with you?
Probably the easiest way is benrichman.com. It's benrichman.com. And that has links to music and social media and all that stuff.
Yeah, and the music's really good. It's awesome indie music. So if you guys haven't heard it, please go check it out. We'll put the link as well. Ben, you send us the link, or what you just said, we'll put the link at the bottom of our video so you guys can go check that out as well. As for me and Kobus, there's my Twitter handle. So if you guys want to speak to me on Twitter, I mean, that's where you go. The same thing for Kobus.
Yeah, right over here. If you want to send me a tweet or tell us that you have got some amazing input and you've got to be on TNO, make contact with us and we will consider your application. Anyway.
But you've got to tell us what kind of Survivor player you'd be before you apply. That's what you've got to do. But also, one last thing, we also got our own Twitter thing. It's called the TNO Survivor Thursday Night Outcasts. So you guys can also follow that. We're trying to get that up and running. I mean, let us know.
100%. Go for it. Thanks, guys, for joining me. I'll see you again. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right.